Hi everybody, it's Maha again, and I'm here to continue reading from my award-winning world first book, Dance of the Womb. And today we are going to continue from the chapter, Understanding the Physiology of Birth. So we'll just wait to see who's there. And we're going to look today in this chapter at the pelvis, the pelvic floor, the uterus, and the cervix, which I call a beautiful union. The primary function of the pelvic girdle is to allow movement of the body, especially walking and running. We know that there's a lot of focus on the pelvis in pregnancy because that's where the baby sits, in the pelvis. And many of the movements that we learn in belly dance for birth or learning how to embody birth are focused in on the pelvis. So in my book, if you've just joined, I'm reading from Dance of the Womb. We are going to firstly look at the pelvis. So the pelvis and its associated muscles and organs become a primary focus once you are pregnant. It has a vital role to play in pregnancy and birth, as well as in prenatal belly dance exercise and labour. To have some basic understanding of its structure and workings is beneficial. And we do this in my embody birth training and in classes for pregnant women. We feel into our pelvis, so we have some understanding and awareness of the parts of the pelvis. Just some basic understanding. So your pelvis is composed of 4 bones. One is the sacrum, 1 the coccyx, which is the tailbone, and 2 intermenate hip bones. The hip bones are made up of 3 parts. These are the iliac, the side, the pubic, the groin, and ischial, the buttock bones. The pelvis is connected to the 5th lumbar vertebrae and is the largest formation of bone in the body. It is supported by your thigh bones at your 2 hip joints. The bones of the pelvis form a strong girdle, similar to a cradle supporting and protecting the womb and your pelvic organs. Its shape is sometimes referred to as a bony basin. So as mentioned, when teaching classes in embodied birth, it's important that women feel their bodies, not just it's as an intellectual exercise, but actually feel into their hip bones, their pubic joint, their tailbone, and the buttock cleft in the bottom. So often women are very tentative about feeling their own body while carrying their baby. So it's a very gentle way to get them to just feel into those bones before we move into any of the embodied birth, belly dance birth movements. So what I like to suggest is to take a moment to feel into your pelvis. Place your hands on your hips, feeling the upper and outer edges. Take the right hand and follow the edge of the hip bone, feeling its curve down to the front of your body. And there you will reach the pubic bone, a hard ridge, or the pubic joint. Take your left hand and place it at the center of your lower back and feel down your back to where your spine and pelvis meet. Then keep running your hand down your spine until it disappears between your buttocks, and this we call the buttock cleft, feeling into your coccyx. In this area of the lower opening of the pelvis, the layers of muscles are called the pelvic floor, and these muscles also play a major role in labor. So by simply just feeling into the hip bones, the iliac, the large bone of the pelvis, coming down into the pubic joint and bone at the front of the pelvis, and then feeling down into the sacrum and into the buttock cleft, right down into the coccyx. So these 4 places in the belly dance birth movements is where the movement emanates, really lower deep down in that pelvis. And this is where baby sits. And so women are connecting with the awareness of their own body and their baby. And so we go into the pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor is very, very important. And when we move with the belly dance birth movements, we understand that the pelvic floor is naturally toned and naturally relaxed. without seizing and holding and then letting go and holding and letting go. Because of the gentle nature of the movements that engage the abdominal muscles and all those parts of the pelvis as described, the pelvic floor gets a gentle workout as well. So it's almost like you don't know that the pelvic floor is being held and relaxed in a natural way through these movements. So as mentioned, the base of the pelvis is filled with a layer of muscle called the pelvic floor. The muscles of the pelvic floor act like a sling supporting the uterus, the bowel, and the bladder. So it keeps all those organs in check. They are several layers deep, situated under the pelvis in two intersecting circles that actually form the shape of a figure eight. They lie in two layers. The inner layer acts like a hammock slung underneath the pelvis, supporting all the pelvic organs. The outer layer acts like a hammock. The outer layer consists of two overlapping circles of muscle. One controls the outlets of the urethral and vaginal sphincters used when you pass urine and make love. The second, smaller of the muscles controls the anal sphincter, which is the opening to the rectum. The muscles overlap and are thickest in the area between the anus and the vagina, known as the perineum. As the baby descends through the lower opening of the pelvis and applies head pressure on the pelvic floor, the muscles need to stretch to widen the vagina for crowning and for the actual birth of baby. So it's really important not to have a tight pelvic floor, but to have a toned pelvic floor. And that's why these belly dance birth movements, the circle movement, the figure eight movement, these pelvic movements will help to tone the pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor, they say, is part of or conducive to about 8% of that baby's head turning before pushing that baby out. So having a toned pelvic floor is better than a tight pelvic floor because it will aid in the birth process. And again, the natural movements of the belly dance birth will naturally relax and release the pelvic floor. And then we move on to the uterus. What is the body of the womb? The uterus. During labor, your womb will open up completely and you will experience a change in your normal consciousness. This great opening of the womb happens only once or a few times in your life. It is a very deep emotional experience which involves a regression to your most basic and primitive feelings. And that quote was taken from Janet Velasquez's book all the way back from 1983, her book Active Birth, which relates a lot to the Embodied Birth program as well, because we are active, we are upright, we are using gravity, and we are moving in through the womb and the pelvic area. And the womb, as I've always talked about, is like a treasure chest of emotion. So we are moving emotion. We are in motion. We are releasing and letting go. We are feeling and excavating deeply into the deepest part of ourselves as women. So physically, the womb or uterus, as it's called, is a hollow muscular organ which is located in the bony pelvis, lying between the bladder in the front and the bowel behind. It is the strongest muscle in the body, which is incredible. The uterus in the woman's body is the strongest muscle in either a man or woman's body, obviously a woman's, but it's incredible that it's the strongest muscle we have. And it's divided into two parts. The upper part is called the body and the lower portion called the cervix uteri. In pre-pregnancy, the uterus is about the size of a loosely clenched fist. It is pear-shaped and weighs approximately 40 to 60 grams. And during pregnancy, it's an incredible organ. It can reach up to 1,000 grams in weight, and its length increases from about 9 centimeters to about 40 centimeters. So it's an amazing organ, the uterus. And the uterine body is made up of muscle and some fibrous tissue. Muscle fibers are arranged in layers, and the walls of the uterus are 2 to 3 centimeters thick. At about 12 to 14 weeks, the uterus can be felt above the bones of the pelvis. It then stretches steadily through pregnancy, moving out of the pelvis toward the ribs and stretching the anterior abdominal wall. At about 36 weeks, in a first-time mother, The leading part of the baby, usually the head, descends into the cavity of the pelvis to become what we call engaged. This engagement of the head is accompanied by a lowering of the upper section of the uterus, releasing pressure for the mother under her ribs, but applying greater pressure on the bladder, thus requiring more frequent urination. So it is an incredible organ, the womb, that carries your baby for 9 months and stretches and opens your emotional casket and your emotional body as well. And one of the many important aspects of the Embody Birth program, as we move into our body, into these different parts of our body, and especially into the womb and the pelvis, is that we touch on deeply held muscular memory that sits in the womb space. So we may release fears, we may release ecstasy, we may release joy, we may release a confusion, we may have feelings that have been harbored there for a long time. Sexual abuse as well is a very big issue for women, and all of that memory that sits in the womb space. So this is another important aspect to remember about a woman giving birth, that as she engages and accesses this kind of a memory that sits in the womb and pelvic area, she may need time to digest what's happening as she excavates into this emotional world. You cannot rush birth. Birth is about timelessness and patience, as I've often talked about. We have to allow for active birth to take its place within the body with the mother and her baby. So until we are in active labour as well, which is around 4 or 5 centimetres, dilated in the cervix, we need to be patient. There can be a slow lead up, or we can escalate through that, especially if this is your 2nd, 3rd or 4th baby. But always the physical body is informed by the emotional and energetic body. What is happening around me? What is happening in the environment of birth that will inform my physical body? And I think this is where often things go wrong in hospital or in a situation that's hierarchical, that doesn't understand the nature of the feminine in birth. The feminine requires spaciousness, intuition, instinct, feeling of being relaxed and surrendered, safe and secure in her environment in order for her body to open. And I'm very, very big on this in the Embody Birth program, as many of you know. So we need to have a great awareness, not just of the physical womb, the physical pelvis, and as we're going to talk about the physical cervix, we need to understand the heart of birth, because birth is about love. So now we're going to go into the contractions of the uterus, or now I call the expansions of the uterus. So I say that the uterus contracts, but that emotional and energetic body that I've just spoken about needs to expand and open. And in order for that to happen, a woman needs to feel safe. So physically, the uterine muscle contracts and relaxes in its non-pregnant and pregnant state. In pregnancy, these movements are referred to as Braxton Hicks contractions and can actually start as early as 8 weeks of pregnancy. They assist good blood circulation through the placenta and help uterine growth. Although Braxton Hicks do not cause progressive opening of the cervix until later pregnancy, they present a good opportunity for you to practice your relaxation and breathing. In early labour, the upper section of the uterus coordinates to contract and assist in the thinning and the dilation of the cervix around the baby's head. It may feel like a wave of discomfort across the abdomen that peaks and then diminishes. Shortening of the muscle fibres of the uterus takes place so the lower part of the womb, the uterus and the cervix, are pulled up around the baby's head. This tightening and relaxation causes the baby's head to put pressure onto the cervix, or if the waters haven't broken, that bag of waters presses down onto the cervix so that it thins and opens and dilates. This tightening and relaxing is what is needed. And this is also an emotional tightening and a relaxing that happens to the mother in labour Again, let's connect the dots. Let's connect the physical body. How does that inform what's happening emotionally in the mother? And this is where we need to take patience and understanding, have compassion. A woman in labor does not need to be saved. She needs to be loved. So we can understand the physicality of the body. What is happening to my uterus? What is happening to my pelvis? What is happening with the cervix? How is that connecting to the baby's journey? And then my own emotional and energetic response to that. Ina May Gaskin, a true spiritual midwife who established a wonderful community, The Farm, of like-minded people in 1971 in Tennessee, USA, says, I like to use the term rush in place of contraction because I think it better describes how to flow with the birthing energy. And I agree with her, and I actually use the term now in my embodied birth classes, expansions. We need to open and expand in order to create room in the pelvis, working with that room with the womb, room and womb. We need to create room for the baby by expanding. So emotionally and energetic expansion. So that's the word I use. The uterus contracts, the emotional energetic body needs to expand, as well as the physical body. The physicality of the uterus muscle in labor is involuntary. That is to say, you don't have control over it. That is its contracting function. But the emotionality of the uterus is affected by your state of mind during labor, as we've just spoken about. This is one of the major labor benefits of using belly dance for birth, embodying birth using these ancient, intuitive, instinctive birthing movements. They aid a woman to accept and surrender actively to each contractive wave of the uterus that she experiences in order to open and expand. So I talk about this in my embodied birth training or classes with pregnant women when we teach, that we need to understand that when we resist that so-called pain in labor or those sensations or those rushes, what's going to happen is the body will tighten up and cause more uncomfortable feelings. So when we can make sounds, when we can breathe, and when we can move into these contractions of the uterus. So without resistance, we openly accept and surrender into the contracting uterus, into our breath, and open our bodies. And then that is how the pelvis will be informed by not resisting, but by staying open. And that's how we create optimal fetal positioning for the baby. But not only that, we create an awareness within our own body as the mother as to what's going on for me. It's not what's going on by what people are telling me to do. It's what is my body with my baby telling me. Where do I move? Where do I take my breath to release tension? What is it that I need to do in order for my body to expand and open in labor, not resist and contract and constrict? So the belly dance birth movements, the circle movements, and the figure eight movements help us to embrace our labor, to breathe, to make sounds, to go where our body needs to go. And this is called proprioception, which means body awareness. I become aware of what my body needs and where my body needs to move to. So this is a really important part of the embodied birth program. And I think it's the missing link in childbirth education is this movement, this understanding of the physical, emotional, energetic and spiritual body in birth and the baby's experience of birth, moving with the mother, with her emotional and energetic self and her physical body. So then we move on to what is the cervix. The word cervix means neck, and it sits at the roof of the vaginal vault and at the floor of the uterus. The cervix is also composed of muscle and fibrous tissue. During pregnancy, it remains closed with a cervical plug acting as a barrier preventing infection. When this plug comes away, and it can come away fully or just a little bit of it can come away, It's actually referred to as a show, and it indicates that the cervix is softening, ready for labour. Now, before you get pregnant, your cervix feels like, if you feel the end of your nose, that's what your cervix feels like, that harder cartilage of the end of your nose. When you progress through pregnancy and get closer to giving birth, guess what? Your cervix feels like your lips, soft like your lips. Okay? And that's why we recommend kissing in labour, opening up that cervix, opening the mouth, the lips. And don't forget, the jaw and the pelvis are connected. If the jaw is tight, the pelvis will be tight. We cannot have a tight jaw and a relaxed pelvis. We need to loosen up in the jaw, loosen up in the lips, loose hips, loose lips, open cervix, relaxed jaw, relaxed pelvis. It's all connected, okay? And then all of that is connected to the whole woman with her baby, her whole baby. So when the plug comes away, it's called a show, and that indicates that the cervix is starting to soften and ripen for labour. We don't need to panic. We don't need to rush. We just need to breathe. We need to slow down, and we need to trust. And those around a woman need to trust as well. We have too much interference before even labour has properly started. Remember, active labour is around 4 or 5 centimetres of dilation of the cervix. So often, women are getting intervention even before the labour begins, in early labour or pre-labour, which is ridiculous. We need to get her to active labour. She needs to come to that place. When she is ready, patience. We need patience. In the first stage of labour, the cervix will efface or thin and dilate to 10 centimetres. And immediately after the placenta, the delivery of the placenta, the cervix begins to close and return to its non-pregnant state. Now, this is another thing that we have to look at, is the way in which women are given an injection in their thigh of syntocinon to shut down the cervix before the placenta is out in a third stage of labour. We call that the natural stage of labour, the third stage, the physiological stage, when the placenta has to come out. Most women in hospital receiving this injection, what does that mean? Firstly, we're rushing, we're impatient. How does that energetically inform the woman's emotional body and her energetic body? She's going to constrict and tighten up when she is being pushed and coerced and made to feel like her body has to push this placenta out before she's ready. So in a natural third stage, physiological third stage, when you bring your baby up to your chest, there's that natural thermometer we've spoken about. There's that skin-to-skin connection. There's the bonding. There's the heart-to-heart connection. There's the eye contact with your baby. Okay? This is not some complicated idea. We are mammals. We are mammals and we need to belong, and when we are born, we are wired to find our mother, to look into her eyes, to feel her skin, to feel the rhythm of her heart and her breath. This is what releases the placenta, not creating chaos and too much talking and bright lights and rushing and impatience. That doesn't release anything. That creates more constriction and holding on, because that creates a fearful environment. So we have to understand that when we gently bring our baby up to our chest, we have connection and the body will naturally soften. And in that whole softening, the cervix will stay open and the placenta can unplug from the uterine wall and come out. Now, there can be emotional reasons that the placenta has difficulty coming out because of the mother's own emotional state. I've been to many, many births and I have seen only a few retained placentas, and I've seen a connection with problems in the relationship and also with bleeding after birth. Sometimes there's a disconnect or a problem or something unspoken in the relationship between the mother and her partner. So again, what's going on emotionally? We need to tune in. We need to trust the mother. What is she experiencing? What is she sharing? Are we creating space for her to share what's going on for her? This will all inform the physical body and how the physical body will birth her baby. It informs the baby. The baby informs the mother. What's happening with the baby? How is the baby speaking to its mother? How is the baby connecting to its mother? How are they dancing together, this dance of birth and this dance of afterbirth? So there's many, many, many things going on. And the birth professionals, those experts, I say stand back and let the mother and baby as the experts guide the birth and the afterbirth story. It is their journey. It's not your journey. We need to put the experts, the mother and the baby, first and foremost at center. When we have this kind of childbirth education, it means that we respect and we honor and we trust in birth, and then birth will trust in us. The mother and baby are number one, and those who've done my embodied birth program know that that is the first revelation of our program. Mother and baby are at center with their partner, with the father, with their family, with the birth professionals. But they are at the center. They sit on the crown of birth, the mother and the baby. Once we can understand this, I can reassure you that birth will flow in a much better way than it is in this modern day, with all of the interference and the professionals putting themselves at center. So I'm going to just go into the little chapter on the stage of labour and delivery as well. So this continues on from speaking about the pelvis, the uterus and the cervix and the placental delivery. So labour is a mystical force that represents every aspect of spiritual life. It is nature, as we are all a part of human nature. The force of labour is the same force that causes waves to crash against the shore or one's breath to lightly brush against our lover's face. Labour is sustained by an exquisite symphony of birth hormones that support a woman's body in her instinctual knowing of how to birth. If she is not disturbed, if she feels safe and loved, then the beauty of this hormonal interplay can be fulfilled. And two doctors who fully promote this notion and whose works are recognised worldwide are Dr. Michelle O'Donnell and Dr. Sarah Buckley, both who endorsed my book, Dance of the Womb. Dr. Sarah Buckley has written much in regards to the hormonal orchestration of birth, and she attests that if we were to consider giving birth as the deepest meditation possible and accord birthing women the appropriate respect, support and lack of disturbance, we would provide the best physiological conditions for birth. And this is what I also talk about and have experienced in my own 3 births. I highly recommend that you read more about their findings in the books they have written. So that's all we're going to talk about today for this chapter on understanding the physiology of birth. And we will go over the stages of labour and delivery in my next talk. But I think it's really, really, really important to share with pregnant women that it's important that, number one, they know that they are at centre with their babies. This is how they connect to their baby, first and foremost. If they need to then spiral out from that place to ask for assistance, to read books, to watch DVDs, to have dialogue, that's wonderful. They need to know that from that place of self-referenced autonomy, they give birth and they make inquiry into having knowledge and informed consent and informed knowledge around birth. So that's really important. And then understanding the physical body, understanding my pelvis, understanding my uterus, my womb, understanding the cervix in labour, understanding the 3rd stage of labour, or the physiological 3rd stage when the placenta comes out, having an understanding of that, physical nature of those places within the body, and then understanding how does my energetic and emotional body inform the physical. And this is very, very important childbirth education. So I hope you've enjoyed my chapter today on understanding the physiology of birth. That's in my book Dance of the Womb that you can buy on my website. And I also have my DVD that you can purchase, so all of the movements in the book are on my DVD, Dance of the Womb, as well as my home birth at 46 to my daughter Amina in 2008. And that really helped me to solidify my understanding of birth at its deepest core, at its deepest essence, and informed my work as the founder of Embody Birth. And in 2017, I'll be doing many more trainings, so get in touch if you'd like to become an Embody Birth teacher and teach childbirth education that makes sense to the woman's body, her emotional, energetic, spiritual, and physical body with her baby. We need to start speaking the language of the feminine for childbirth, and we need to start creating safe, secure places and environments for women to give birth so her physical body can open and her emotional body can feel relaxed in order for her body to open. So thanks everyone for listening today, and go to my website, which is www.mahaalmusa.com, and I'd love to see you there. Thanks very much. Namaste. Thank you.